Welcome to another Wolverine Chronicle exclusive segment, Behind Enemy Lines. This week we are looking at Indiana, and I have Mason Williams, senior writer from the Hoosier.com. Is it The Hoosier?
The Hoosier, yes.
The Hoosier.com. And of course, that is Indiana Rivals. It's the Indiana chapter of Rivals. Mason, thank you for taking the time to speak with me and provide a little bit of enemy intel on our opponent. How you doing, buddy?
Not too bad, man. How are you doing? I appreciate the opportunity always, and yeah, looking forward to it. Let's get into it.
Let's jump right in. Let's talk some football, man. That's what we're here to talk about. So I'm curious, what is the strength as far as position groups go of this team? What is the strongest position group so far this season?
With Indiana, I would say the way they've been playing, there's not been many. There's not been many strengths to this team, but one that always I come back to is the defensive line on this team. It's rebuilt. It's new this year. It's much bigger, much more physical than it has been in years past, and they've done that really through the acquisition of a ton of transfers that really haven't been in the program this year. That's kind of the theme all over the place with Indiana this year, is that there's just a ton of transfers that have been playing significant snaps and seeing a lot of the field for Indiana this year. But the D-line, specifically guys like Andre Carter, Philip Bleedy, a couple of those guys like that have been kind of just the main guys both on the interior and on the edge. And then linebackers are always good under Tom Allen, especially a guy like Aaron Casey, who's in his sixth year now with the program. He's kind of risen through the ranks and just kind of progressed to being this kind of, playmaker in the middle that's kind of always around the ball for Indiana. So the defense, while there hasn't been much of a bright side to either side of this team, the defense has still been, I would say, the better unit of the two, and those are kind of the two position groups that kind of lead it. But it's a young team, and they've had their fair share of growing pains for sure.
You're talking about that front seven, and man, they're going to have their work cut out for them in this game. You got an offensive line, a couple really strong running backs that they're going to be chasing around the field. So let's flip the question around here. What is the weakness of this Indiana team?
I would say probably the defensive backs, with the exception defensively that obviously the front seven is kind of where Indiana's defense finds its identity. It's very young in the defensive backfield already, and they've had some injuries kind of cut out some key contributors that they thought were going to play a lot of the snaps this season. They turned teams over through interceptions a bit, and they've kind of had a propensity to kind of pick guys off every now and then. But when it comes to defending these wide receivers, Maryland took the top off of Indiana's defense consistently. In the first half of the Louisville game, they did the same thing. And it's kind of just been a worrying trend with Indiana's defensive backs, where they have an individual breakdown here or there, and it just happens at the worst time, and they get bit by the big play. So I'm not sure if they're the worst, but they're the group that's kind of broke down the most. If you understand what I'm saying, it's like when there's kind of a finger to point, that's generally where it ends up. And I would say also on the offensive side, the offensive line has been among the conference's worst the past couple seasons. It's still better this season with regards to pass blocking, but they've still really struggled to open up many holes in the run game at all for Indiana's running backs, who is actually a pretty skilled position group on the team as well. But they've not really had the chance to showcase it because Indiana's offensive line hasn't found much success in that running game. So I would say it's kind of a double-edged sword, where there's been some breakdowns defensively and some missed schemes and alignments offensively, where it just hasn't worked out much for Indiana so far this year.
Well, speaking of that offensive side of the ball, is there a singular playmaker that Michigan needs to watch out for? I think I know what your answer is going to be here, but who's the guy on the offensive side of the ball that is your impact player?
I'll give you two, because one, I saw that Jim Harbaugh already kind of pointed them out in the return game, but it's Jalen Lucas. He's lightning in a bottle for Indiana in the backfield. They've lined him up in the slot a little bit because he kind of has some pass blocking discrepancies where he has some issues in that, but he's still a sophomore. He's only, he's one of the shorter guys on the field too. So asking him to take on some of those defensive front seven guys, especially the kind of guys that Michigan is going to have on the field, has given him a bit of fits, and understandably so, right? But he is lightning in a bottle. And then I would also give a nod to Tayven Jackson, Indiana's quarterback. He's also had his own sense of growing pains, and he's a redshirt freshman. He only had like 10 or 15 snaps to his name before starting a game for Indiana this year. So I would say those are the two guys that are probably near the top of Indiana's scouting report. Josh Henderson is also a guy in Indiana backfield where he's missed the last couple of games with a leg injury. But if he's back available this week, Indiana likes to do a lot of different things with him and Lucas in the backfield. So that could be a guy that could pose some challenges to Michigan's front seven as well. But I mean, Jalen Lucas, obviously, you have to know where number 12 is on the field at all times if you're going up against Indiana.
Yeah, that's just as I suspected. I have a feeling. I have a feeling our eyes will be on him, and so it would be interesting to see if they use him as a decoy a little bit, just for that exact reason. I'm hopeful and pretty confident that Michigan's defense will be able to game plan for him and whatever decoy action they might throw out there. Let's flip it to the other side of the ball. On the defense, who's the impact player? Who's the guy? Is it in that front seven? Is it in the secondary? Like, who's the playmaker that Michigan needs to look out for?
I kind of mentioned him earlier, but Aaron Casey, 44, is like a magnet to the ball. And it seems like he's followed in the footsteps of Micah McFadden in 2021 and Cam Jones last year. And then Cam Jones went down last year, so he kind of also had some time elevated into that lead linebacking role. But 44 is always going to be around the ball for Indiana on defense. And he could have a pretty busy day on Saturday with the propensity of this Michigan attack. We've seen that, obviously. I'm sure you're well versed in that, but Indiana's not seen an offense like Michigan's all year. So they're going to be tested heavily. And if they're going to make some plays, it's going to be on the basis of number 44, Aaron Casey, and then also number 1, Andre Carter. If he can get into the backfield and maybe disrupt some of the things that J.J. McCarthy wants to do, or kind of give the offensive line a little bit of trouble and kind of disrupt a little bit of the running game from the edge, that would be to Indiana's benefit as well. But also a nod in the defensive backfield. They are young. They have had their miscues, but Philip Dunham, I think, has intercepted 3 balls this year for Indiana already. And he was kind of the guy that everybody tabbed as the defense's turnover playmaker guy in the fall camp, and it has kind of translated over to the regular season as well. We didn't see it as much against Maryland, but and obviously Michigan is a tall task in its own. But I would say that those are some of the guys that they've been making plays when they've been made this year. So I would look out for those guys this weekend.
Well, you always got to look out for a guy that's wearing number 44. If a guy's rocking the number 44 jersey, he's going to be a hard worker. He's going to be gritty. He's going to be making plays. You don't rock a number like that if you're interested in like box score stats and flash.
Right.
So
also 44 is a number in the Indiana program that means a lot. That was George Taliaferro's number. And last year, Indiana created a tradition where kind of the leader of their team, and specifically, a guy that's an outspoken voice in the locker room, gets the honor of wearing 44 on the field to kind of honor Taliaferro's legacy each and every Saturday. So his nickname is Ace. That's what all of his teammates and coaches call him. So Aaron Ace Casey has worn that number for the past 2 years, and this being his 6th year. I mean, he's been around college ball a lot. So, but you're absolutely right. Like, he is all business, and he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink for Indiana defensively.
That's why I love college football. You get those deeply ingrained, entrenched traditions in these programs. I had no idea that was a meaningful number at Indiana, but now I know. So in future years, I can look out for it a little bit.
Right.
So here's a question for you. This might be a little bit of a depressing question to ask an Indiana fan that's sitting in the Big Ten East, but I've been asking it to everybody I've interviewed on this segment on a weekly basis. Where do you see Indiana finishing in the Big Ten?
Well, it's bleak. The outlook is bleak. I would just come right out and say that it's probably between Indiana, Rutgers, and Michigan or in Michigan State, excuse me,
Hmm.
to get out of that basement of the Big Ten East. The talent has been there for Indiana in certain situations this year, but the coaching situation has been up and down, and there's talks of whether Tom Allen's on the hot seat. He's already fired an offensive coordinator heading into the bye week, so that'll be a whole different challenge in itself. Where Rod Carey, the new full-time offensive coordinator, not interim, but he got put on full-time, now has the Michigan defense, which, if my memory serves me correctly, is the best defense scoring wise in all of
Yeah.
college football this year. Right. So have fun with that, Rod Carey. But um, Indiana's got, kind of a bleak outlook where but they have both Rutgers and Michigan State still on the schedule. So I think what's crucial for Indiana, if they want to avoid finishing last in the Big Ten East, if they want to win another game essentially this year, because you look at the schedule, you've got Michigan left, you've got Wisconsin left, you've got Penn State left. Like, those are teams that are just in a different talent realm than where Indiana is. And then it's a whole different conversation coaching wise as well. Illinois hasn't looked great, and you never know what to expect in the old opening bucket game with Purdue. But I think there's not a game left on Indiana's schedule. Indiana even has Rutgers at home, but I don't think right now, if an opening line was to come out, that they would be favored in that game. So Indiana probably is on the back foot and an underdog in every single outing the rest of the season. So if you're going by just that, you would probably say last, at least in the division. And then I'm not entirely sure what the outlook of the Big Ten West is right now. I feel like it's just been a whirlwind. But obviously, at the beginning of the year, we were talking about Northwestern probably being one of the worst teams in the conference. But hey, they went out and beat Minnesota.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where in a power rankings Indiana probably falls, but it's probably last. I mean, they've got 2 wins. Only one of them's over an FBS opponent, and they needed to go to 4 overtimes against Akron to do so. So right now, the outlook is bleak, and if things don't turn around, I would project Indiana to probably finish last in the Big Ten East. What that means for the future of the program and for the future of Tom Allen, I'm not sure, but I'm glad it's not my seat. That's inevitably going to get warm if it isn't already. You know what I mean? But I would expect them right now, unless something changes, probably last right now.
Yeah, it does feel like his seat is warm, if not very hot. And it almost feels like he needs to achieve an upset this season, in order to keep that job, at least from an outsider's perspective, looking in. Let me ask you this. Finish this sentence, I should say. Indiana beats Michigan on Saturday
If Rod Carey runs a completely different offensive system than what's been working, and there is more than a few strokes of luck for Indiana. I mean, they're 34.5 point underdogs this week. At least that's what they opened as. I'm not sure what the line is currently right now, but Michigan is, and I'm sure this is probably the conversation on your side, is Michigan the best team in the country? I, from an outsider's perspective, tend to think that they are right now. Nobody's playing better football than them right now. I'll say that. And there's probably not many teams that are on a more worrying trend than the one Indiana's on right now. I don't think the bye week could have come at a better time, at a chance, giving them a chance to make some changes offensively and to give them, as much prep time as possible for a team like Michigan. But Indiana wins Saturday if they get probably every single 50-50 call, every single 50-50 ball to go their way. They find something that on film has something that nobody else has figured out in the first 5 or 6 games against Michigan this year, and they limit the rushing attack and passing attack from Michigan. But nobody's really done that this year, and Indiana's defense specifically over the past few weeks has had their own issues in doing that. So it's going to take a lot for Indiana. Obviously, it's college football. Nothing is ever impossible, but it's certainly improbable. for Indiana to go into the Big House, which I believe they haven't won in since 1967. So if Indiana's going to go in and snap a, what is that, probably 50-year history, is my math correct on that? Is that 50 years plus? Um, they're going to need a lot of help to do so.
Well, I tell you what, I've got some good news for you. There's a solar eclipse that's scheduled to happen about an hour into the game, or like a partial eclipse or something. So, there's weird stuff going on.
Something's going on, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a rainy game. If we were playing Michigan State, I wouldn't trust anything right now because I don't trust anything when we're playing Michigan State. But if Indiana wants to hold on to anything right now, that solar eclipse, maybe it's October, so it's a little bit of a strange month, so maybe something can go on.
Yeah.
Let's turn it around here. Michigan wins if
Michigan plays their brand of football. Michigan is the better football team in this matchup. There's absolutely no denying that. The talent level maybe on the first line of the depth chart is not necessarily as I'm not sure the word I'm looking for here is, maybe the gap of talent on the top line of the depth chart isn't necessarily as big as some people may think, but the depth of Michigan, I mean, they went to Minnesota and played 74 of the 75 players. The only guy that didn't get in was the backup long snapper. They've got just depth, and it's all battle tested. I think I saw also as well, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but McCarthy has only not played like a single meaningful fourth quarter snap yet. I know he played a little bit against Rutgers, but that game was already decided still.
He's thrown 3 or 4 passes against Rutgers in the fourth quarter. He hadn't really done anything in the fourth quarter yet. And yeah, I don't anticipate over the next few games that'll change much given our schedule. Right.
So Michigan wins if they play their game, just the way that they've been playing, the way that they've been rolling heading into this matchup. I'm assuming, there's always been an element, at least in the past, where Indiana's had a propensity to kind of play close to much better teams. Even this year, Ohio State playing, pretty close for 3 quarters, but then it kind of came out where Indiana was like, well, we just wanted to keep that game close for as long as possible, and then didn't really, act on the opportunity when they realized, hey, they're only down 14 points. They're only down 17 points to Ohio State. So Michigan wins if they play their game. They're the better team. And maybe if the rain and the solar eclipse holds off and no voodoo magic comes down on the Big House on Saturday, then Michigan will probably walk out of there with a victory.
Let me get a score prediction out of you. What do you anticipate this final score looking like?
The question mark for me always lies in how many points Indiana is going to score in this game. So I would assume, they're scoring 12.5 points a game versus FBS opponents right now through 4 games. So, but a new offensive coordinator, they've got the playmakers to make some noise if they're utilized correctly. But this is a tall first task. So I would say, probably along the lines of, I'll go 45-10 Michigan. 45-10.
That's fair. That seems like a reasonable score. It's kind of right at the spread. That'd be, I think, a 1-point cover for Michigan.
Right.
Well, Mason, you're a gentleman. I appreciate you making the time to share a little insights on the opponent for us. Let all of my listeners and followers know, where can they follow you if they want to get some more insights on Indiana?
Well, first of all, Michael, I appreciate the time and the opportunity as well. As he mentioned at the beginning, I'm the senior writer this year at thehoosier.com, or Indiana's rival site. I'm also a senior at Indiana University, so I'm a student in the position, but you can find me on Twitter at MVSON Williams. I thought I was really clever with that when I made my Twitter, thinking the V looked like an upside down A, and apparently Mason Williams is a much more common name than I thought. But you can find me on X or Twitter, or whatever we're calling it, at MVSON Williams. And you can find us at thehoosier.com, as he mentioned. We cover recruiting, football, basketball. We try to keep a pulse on everything, but we've got a staff full of students right now, so we're doing the best we can to keep up. But we will be in Ann Arbor this weekend, so yeah, looking forward to it. And like I said, appreciate the opportunity as well, and your time as well for having me on.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. For Mason Williams with thehoosiers.com, and I'm Michael Smeltzer. That was Behind Enemy Lines.
It's great to be a Michigan boy.